Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Before we start, let me wish everyone a very happy Navratri season. So let's get started and look at the topics that we're going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 most important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. So, now before we start with our discussion, Unacademy has a special offer for the Navratri season. Now you can enroll for our online classes at just 19,999, and this is a limited period offer. The best part is that along with availing the discount, if you enroll within the offer period, you stand a chance to get up to several months of free extension on your subscription. Unacademy is calling it the Siksha Mahotsav. Let's say you go for a 6-month subscription, you will get up to 6-month subscription free along with 6 months of CSE Assure. And the same holds good for 12-month and 18-month subscription as well. Now, what is the CSE Assure? Now, let's say for some reason you don't clear the prelims exam. And if you meet these conditions, which are listed over here, then Unacademy will assure that you will get another free extension to prepare for the next attempt. So those interested, click on the link provided in the video description. And if you want the PDF of the session, because the PDF is very detailed, I've added several maps and notes as well. So if you want the PDF, please scan the QR code on your screen and join our official Telegram channel. We will share the PDF over here after the session ends. Now let's begin and look at the first topic. On the front page, we have an article related to Trump's madness. There is a related editorial as well. This is based on the recent presidential proclamation related to the H-1B visas. The day before yesterday, I'm sure many of you must be familiar with this topic already. This presidential proclamation issued by the US President Donald Trump caused complete chaos amongst Indians, particularly in the United States, and their families back home in India. It sent a shockwave across the Indian IT industry and as well as across the tech industry in the United States as well. So, what was this presidential proclamation that was signed by President Donald Trump? According to the initial reports that came in, based on the statement that was given by the Commerce Secretary, Mr. Ludwig, who was present when Trump was signing the presidential proclamation, he made a claim that going forward, the US would be levying a $100,000 fee on H-1B visas. The US Commerce Secretary stated that this fee would be an annual fee which might be levied on all the H-1B visa holders. Without giving any further clarification, this is what the Commerce Secretary stated in front of the President as he was signing this controversial presidential proclamation. So this was enough to set off panic amongst the Indian professionals who are working in the US. You might have seen reports of how Indians who were on a plane, on a Emirates plane, they demanded that they step down immediately because this order would take effect by Sunday midnight. And this led to confusion and chaos that they may not be allowed back into the US if they leave the country without paying the $1 lakh fee, which is a substantial amount of money. All the tech companies, be it Microsoft, Meta, Apple, Google, all of them started immediately sending out mails to their employees who are on H-1B visas, asking them to stay in the country, to not leave the US. And if they are already outside of US, let's say they are in India to meet their families, they were asked to immediately come back, if possible, within the deadline. So in India, those Indian workers who work in the US on H-1B visas, they panicked as well. They started booking tickets. And we saw an exponential rise in the air ticket prices as well. Many Indians have lost their hard-earned money as well because of this entire chaos that was created by the Trump administration. Now, after 24 hours, that is yesterday morning, finally there was some official confirmation as to what this presidential proclamation actually meant. The press secretary to the White House issued a clarification stating that this fee is not for existing or current H1B holders. And it is also not an annual fee. H1B holders currently are not expected to pay any of the fee. First of all, the H1B visa, the work visa, is sponsored by the company that you're working for. Essentially, the company is expected to take this burden. But the point is, usually the salaries, it averages around $1 lakh and slightly above than that. Those who are on H1B visas. So no company would take such a big financial burden. They wouldn't end up paying such a big amount of money when their salaries are around the same margin. So it was essentially an indicator that maybe those on H1B visas would be removed because of this restriction which was being brought in. Or maybe the companies would eventually pass it down to the employees, but eventually it doesn't make any practical economic sense. So that is the prime reason for this entire confusion and chaos. So the press secretary finally clarified that this is not going to be an annual fee. It's not going to be imposed every year. And it is not for existing current holders. It will not impact them in any way. So this again goes on to show the way in which the US administration is being run by the current White House, by the current president. Imagine on camera, the president signs the proclamation with his commerce secretary standing next to him, who says that this is going to be an annual fee without giving any clarity on its implementation. This triggers complete chaos, and then one day later, they appear to change the track. Maybe there was a lot of pressure from the US tech giants as well. But eventually, the clarification is that this $1 lakh fee will apply only for the new applications, which will be picked up in the next year's lottery season. H1Bs are allotted through a lottery system, and I'll explain this. This is very important. So before we discuss what the H1B visa is, what is its impact on India, first please understand that the White House has now confirmed that this is not going to impact the current visa holders of H1B. Let's say their entry, re-entry will not be impacted. They can freely move out of the US, come back as well, which means they can come to India, stay for some time, meet their families and go back without any implications. Only for new applications starting from the next lottery cycle, this fee would be applicable, and it is going to be a one-time fee. So this clarification has essentially brought the chaos to an end, and it has been a much needed relief for the Indian workers in the United States. But this is a clear message, a message coming from the White House, coming from the United States, that they do not want foreign immigrant workers. Despite how much economic sense it makes, the message is very clear that the policy of the Trump administration is anti-immigration. It is rooted in nativist protectionism. It is rooted in the far right-wing ideology that drives the Trump government right now. This is an important message for Indians, the Indian youth, a message to India as well. So before we discuss all of that, let's understand what is this H1B visa. The H1B is essentially a professional work visa provided by the US immigration to facilitate the entry of skilled professional labor into the US market. This visa system was rolled out in the 1990s through a congressional act, through a law passed by the US Congress, the Immigration Act. The H1B visa was legitimized and given statutory status, essentially to attract global talent, those who have high education, high skills, specialized professional knowledge, to attract such workforce into the US. The United States came out with the H1B visa in 1990s. And as the tech boom was taking place, the demand for H1B visas started rising exponentially. And any provision related to H1B visa, it can be regulated, modified only by the US Congress. Since it is based on a law passed by the US Congress, Any changes related to it can be made only by the US Congress. Now, you can ask, then, sir, how did Trump issue this proclamation? How can President come out with a proclamation if only Congress can make changes to the visa policy? That's because the Trump administration was invoking the ground of national security. The grounds on which this $1 lakh fee is being levied is on the grounds of national security. Because according to the Trump administration, H-1B visas have been misused by American companies, by foreign immigrant workers. That is their allegation. So they believe that this has led to the entry of immigrants who might pose a threat to America's national security. So on those grounds, President has the authority. When national security is invoked, even if there is a congressional law, the president can make certain changes through the proclamation. But of course, it will have to stand the test of judicial review in the courts. So this proclamation would be challenged, obviously, in the courts, and the courts will essentially check the validity of this proclamation. But these things aside, these legalities aside, the H-1B visa has been very, very crucial for Indians who have been dreaming of the so-called American dream. This has been the gateway for talented Indian youth to work in the United States. This is what drove the demand for higher education in the US, where Indian youth would seek education opportunities in American universities, study as a student, and then opt for H-1B visas and start working in the US. So, this is what built our close people to people relationship. If you look at, let's say, San Francisco, the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, most tech companies relied upon talented immigrant workers from countries like India, China, and the others. Now, under the H-1B visa system, there is a yearly cap on the number of visas that are issued. In 2004, the number of H-1B visas issued per year was capped at 85,000. But this cap has been increased every now and then, depending on the demand of the tech industry, depending on the demand for talented workforce in the STEM domain, in science, technology, engineering, medicine. Depending on the demand that was coming in from the American industry, US government would often increase the cap and essentially provide for more H-1B visas. But in general, the yearly cap is at 85,000. But out of these visas that are issued, especially in the last decade, 70% of these visas are being issued to Indians. It is the Indian youth, Indian workers who have primarily benefited from the H-1B visa system. Especially if you look at the immigration data of last 10 years, the last decade, the data is very clear. More than 70% of all the H1 applications that were picked in the lottery system, it has gone to Indians. China comes a distant second at just 12 to 13%. So this Indian workforce, which has migrated to US over the last 3+ decades, they have primarily contributed to the rise of the American tech industry. Be it the American startups, the tech giants, the big tech firms. Across these organizations, it's primarily Indians who are employed. Even in the healthcare domain, in medicine, from doctors to nurses, in research institutions, from NASA to advanced research facilities across American universities, it is largely the Indian professionals who are employed who have become the backbone of America's research and development and innovation ecosystem. This has brought benefits for India as well, because the successful Indian diaspora would send remittances back home to India. They would even come back to India eventually, bringing back the knowledge, the expertise, and this has brought close collaboration between the research and development ecosystem of India and the United States. It has brought American companies to India, and it has created opportunities for Indian tech companies to essentially look for outsourcing opportunities. So, this provision is what led to the transformation of India US relations as well, in a way. Our economic ties, our cultural people to people relations transformed because of this. So, now the US administration is taking a direct hit at the very channel which allowed Indians to migrate into the US in such large numbers. And don't forget, this is all legal, by the way. This is all legal migration. It's not that they're targeting illegal migrants. Now, what is the overall objective of the Trump administration here, because it makes zero economic sense to bring such restrictions on H1B visa, because it is primarily United States which is benefiting. Of course, Indians have benefited. India also has slightly benefited. But the primary benefit of H1B visa is for the United States itself. It's for American tech companies. It's for America's healthcare sector. Without the Indian talent, let's say overnight, hypothetically imagine if Indian workers were removed from the US, trust me, most of the American companies would collapse overnight. Because this is not just about uh, the cost of labor. Generally, Indian workers are more affordable for the American companies. It's not just the cost, but it's about the talent and the skills as well. US simply doesn't have an alternate replacement. The US can't simply replace Indian workers overnight with American talent. That is the ground reality. So Trump administration is completely disregarding this fact. Now, it is because of H1B visa system that Indians would aspire to study in American universities, enroll as students. After graduation, they would land lucrative job offers in American companies, and they would transition into a H1B visa. It is this path which made the American dream possible for lakhs of Indians. In fact, in the last a few months itself, if you look at data from 2022 to 2023, okay, in this period during Biden administration, the cap on H1B visa was raised. Almost 3.59 lakh applications were received. Most of them were approved in the lottery system, and 72% of them went for Indians. So easily more than 1 lakh Indians every year were getting H1B visas. That was the scale, the numbers. Now, to break this system in one go will essentially decimate the the future prospects, the life of these Indian workers, and more importantly, it will be self-defeating. It's like scoring a self-goal. The US economy will take a hit, as the American companies would not easily find alternatives to Indian talent. Then why is the Trump administration doing this? Please understand, this has nothing to do with economic sense. There is zero economic rationality behind this. This is all about ideology and protectionism. Right wing ideology, which has taken root across the world, especially the far right, has essentially pushed a anti-immigration agenda. You see this across the world, from Australia to Europe to, of course, Canada and even United States. As the number of immigrant workers has risen in these countries, there is growing resentment amongst the native local population that foreign workers are prospering, which is true as well. This is always a issue when outsiders tend to pose a threat, economic, social threat to the native community, be it in case of housing, in case of job availability, right? The native population has been struggling in most of these developed nations, whereas the foreign workers who come in, who have a motivation, a drive to work harder, or more talented as well in some cases, they would put in that extra effort, they would prosper, rise quickly, and they would even start buying property, investing in businesses. So this rise of immigrant workers will obviously create resentment amongst the local communities. Plus, in a way, Indian diaspora should also be blamed for this trend. You might have seen these large anti immigration rallies that were held across Australian cities, recently in London. The reason is not just the resentment of the natives, the locals, not just about right wing protectionism. It's also about how Indian community, which was always well regarded, has started affecting its own image. Previously, the perception was Indians are law abiding citizens, that Indians follow the rules and laws, they are very obedient, they don't cause any problems, they don't get involved in crime. So, this was a very good positive image for India and Indian workers. But this has started changing, especially because of the loud celebratory mood that some Indian diaspora members have tried to bring in by loudly celebrating Indian festivals, blocking roads, uh, holding huge rallies, including political rallies during elections in India. Now, this crosses a line somewhere. So, this exuberant behavior of some members of the Indian community has created more concern and resentment amongst the locals, bringing that anger against the entire group of Indian diaspora across these developed nations. So this has nothing to do with economic sense, because countries like US, be it Australia, be it European countries who depend on Indian talented workforce, if they were to remove the Indian workers overnight, they are the ones who will take a bigger hit. Their own companies, their own economy will take the hit. But as I said, this is not about economics. This is more about ideology. This is more about native protectionism. So this offers a key lesson for India, and it's not just a challenge for India and Indians. I would personally say that this is an opportunity for India that we should capitalize upon. See, growing up, we've all heard about the brain drain from India from 1950s, 1960s itself. Due to the lack of opportunities in India, talented Indians have always sought opportunities abroad. From studying abroad to working abroad, talented Indian youth have always been moving out of the country due to the lack of opportunities in our country, due to the poor standard of higher education, the lack of availability of jobs, and the poor focus on research development and innovation, and the lack of monetary benefits. This naturally drove the talented Indians out of the country, and it has only picked up after 80s, 90s, and early 2000. So now the time has come to reverse the brain drain. Even the Indian workforce, which has moved out many years ago, many decades ago, it's time for them to realize as well that they are no longer welcome in other countries. Previously, Indians were received, welcomed with great respect. There would be that harmony that was seen, and now you see that declining, and it's quite evident, quite drastic. And it's a result of rising anti immigration trends and far right wing ideology that is gaining ground around the world. So, the Indian community abroad should get the message very clear that they are no longer welcome as they were before. The so called American dream is about to crash. Now it is about the Indian dream. For the next few decades, India is well poised to register tremendous growth to eventually become a Viksit Bharat, a developed nation, in a couple of decades or maybe 3 to 4 decades. So, this is an opportunity not just for the Indian diaspora abroad to come back to build in India, but for the Indian government to leverage the opportunity as well. Because in all of this, the response of the Indian government has been quite shocking. The statement of the Ministry of External Affairs, instead of taking a firm stand against Trump's erratic policies, it almost appeared apologetic. If you've seen the statement, the MEA has only raised concern about the humanitarian situation which might be created because of these policies, because of the kind of impact it can have on Indian workers and their families. The MEA issued a statement asking the US to be mindful about the humanitarian consequences. And MEA said, we are studying the consequences with the Indian industry. No, that is not the response you usually expect. Now, when you have our diplomats, the MEA spokesperson, even our foreign minister for that matter, issuing rhetoric driven statements which go viral on social media, targeting other countries when they hurt Indian interests. To see such a meek response from India has been quite shocking. But again, to be fair to the Modi government, there's nothing much India could have done. We have almost no leverage with the US when it comes to the tariff wars as well as the immigration policy as well. This, of course, is an internal policy of the US. There's nothing much we can do. Even in terms of diplomatic pressure, we don't have leverage to impose any kind of pressure on the White House. So that explains why India's response has been meek. But now it should be a lesson for the Indian government as well. To attract the Indian workforce abroad, to bring them back into India, to reverse the brain drain, first you need to create those opportunities. The youth in our own country are struggling for jobs. Unemployment is a pressing challenge. Even now, there isn't enough focus on infrastructure development, on building civic sense amongst our population. And there is no focus on innovation, research, and development. Yes, big changes have happened in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, but it is not enough to meet the aspiration of the Indian youth. So now you see a big shift which is happening again because of Trump's policies. There has been more than a 50% decline in the Indian students who are looking to study in the US. They are preferring to study in Indian colleges, which is great news for India. But now the question is, can our universities, colleges, government, can they step up? Can they provide quality education, quality research opportunities, good employment opportunities with monetary benefits so they can aspire for a good life in India? Can we provide better facilities, better civic sense in our society? This is what will help India transform itself. Use this challenge as an opportunity. Yes, in the short term, there would be a big impact, a negative impact on our economy as well. But in the long term, if India leverages this challenge, turns this into an opportunity, this is what could power the next phase of India's growth. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. Now, take up this mains practice question. Let's take a quick look and I'll provide you the answer writing approach as well. The global trend of rising anti immigration sentiment poses a significant challenge for Indian diaspora, but creates an enormous opportunity for India. Discuss how this challenge can be seen as an opportunity by the Indian state. That is the focus of this question. So you can start your answer with an introduction where you talk about the role of the Indian diaspora, Indian immigrant workers, how they have contributed to the economies of developed nations in Europe, in US, in Australia. Because see, the question is not specific to any country, right? It's a very broad question on Indian diaspora, the anti-immigration trend seen around the world, and what challenge does it pose for the Indian community, how it is an opportunity for India. That's what the question is asking. So introduce the role of the Indian diaspora in these countries, in the technology domain, in healthcare sector, in research and development. Give examples. Point out how many top tech giants of the US are headed by Indian CEOs. Point out the scale of Indian workforce in these countries. Point out how H1B visas, almost 70%, more than 70%, are given to Indian workers in the US. Almost same trends are seen in Australia and European countries as well, where most of the technology related jobs in the STEM domain in particular, right? It usually goes to Indian migrant workers, which means the Indian workforce has been a backbone. They have contributed to their economy. And also, don't forget, Indian students who go to study, right, they're paying a hefty admission fees for these universities from Australia to Britain to United States. They incur a lot of living expenses, which generates an economy of its own, which eventually benefits these countries, the businesses of these countries, the citizens of these countries. Finally, when they take up jobs, they are constructively contributing to the economy of these nations. But the anti immigration trend, driven by the far right ideology, ignores these contributions of the Indian community. So, if they're not recognizing it, let it be. The time has come for the diaspora to return, come back, reverse the brain drain. So, your answer should focus on this as well. In the body, talk about the impact of these trends, the policies which are being seen. How does it affect the Indian community? This will lead to increasing incidents of racism, especially the children of the Indian workers abroad would face the entire brunt of it, from schools to the local parks. And many such cases are being reported already in few countries. So point out the humanitarian impact, the financial and the uh, essentially the emotional impact which will be on the Indian community. Talk about the challenges that they're going to face going forward. So then you can discuss how India can turn this into an opportunity. But you need to provide a way forward. If we have to turn this into an opportunity, what should be done? Improve the quality of higher education. Ensure there is greater investments in research and development. Explore the new emerging areas from AI to quantum computing to other critical domains which are coming up. Invest enough in infrastructure. Build civic sense amongst our population. One reason why Indians aspire to live abroad, even settle there and acquire citizenship of other countries as well, is mainly because of the high standard of living. Many of them don't feel like coming back to India because of the poor standard of living in our country. So it is time to address these problems, build better roads, tackle pollution, ensure that our population has better civic sense. They know how to behave in the society. Honestly, many Indians lack civic sense, which directly impacts your quality of life. Correct? So bring out these points, if not in such a crude, harsh manner, that's just for the sake of explanation. You can point out that the Indian government needs to focus on these priorities, from infrastructure to job opportunities to education opportunities to even building civic sense and improving the standard of living. So it will not happen in the short term. It will take years of effort, but this is something which is worth it. If you can reverse the brain drain, India can benefit enormously. And this could add more strength as India rises to eventually come up as a developed nation. Right? So conclude on these lines on a very optimistic note. So this should be the broad approach that you can take. And please use this discussion that we have had to practice your answer writing. Now, coming to the next article on page number 8, there is another editorial that is related to uranium mining in the country. This is another interesting topic, very important for both prelims and mains, because I'll be going beyond the editorial. I'll be including some important facts for your prelims as well. So please concentrate. So this article focuses on uranium mining in Meghalaya. I hope you're aware, in Meghalaya, in the Khasi Hill region, which is a autonomous tribal district as well with constitutional protection, uranium reserves were discovered many years ago, and government of India has been making every effort to try and extract uranium in Meghalaya. But however, since the Khasi region has constitutional protection under the 6th schedule, it is home to the Khasi tribe. There is an autonomous district council with its own autonomous powers when it comes to tribal land, tribal property, and tribal rights. Plus, any such mining project, particularly that of uranium, raises a lot of environmental concerns and even concerns for human health, concerns for tribal rights. So there has been a lot of opposition, local opposition against such large-scale mining projects. So the government of India was trying every route possible, because I hope you're aware, whenever a large public project has to be taken up, which can uproot the local community or impact the local community, a public consultation has to be carried out. The government has to consult the local community, generate their responses, their viewpoints, treat the local population as stakeholders in the project, and any impact, environmental impact, health impact, economic impact of these large public projects, the local population should be compensated, should be taken care of by the government. If they're getting displaced, they should be rehabilitated. If they are losing their livelihood, they should be compensated for that or given jobs. If they are losing their houses, the government should build alternate houses and rehabilitate the population. If there are environmental concerns, it has to be addressed by the government. That is the duty of a democratic state. So public consultation has always been the norm in the process of mining. Whenever large public projects are taken up, consulting the local population, generating their viewpoints, addressing their concern, and then proceeding forward with the project has been the, the essential structure of resource exploitation in our country. But however, due to the opposition by the Khasi tribe, the uranium mining project could never take off. And as you know, uranium is a very important critical resource, critical for nuclear energy projects, very crucial for India's energy security. The government itself has great plans to increase the share of nuclear energy, which is clean, which is going to help us reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. So, for this purpose, the government was trying to push ahead. But after repeated objection and opposition from the local community, the government has bypassed public consultation itself. Recently, the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change has issued a OM. What is a OM? Office Memorandum. It's like an executive order signed by the Environment Ministry. And what does this OM state? This Office Memorandum of Environment Ministry states, for uranium mining project in Khasi region of Meghalaya, public consultation is not necessary. Basically, the government is waiving off the public consultation process itself, meaning now the government can bulldoze the project. It can essentially bulldoze the public opinion and try to push the project into the region. Now, this raises some troubling questions. So the Hindu editorial, honestly, is biased. It is taking a one sided view focused only on tribal rights and environmental concerns, ignoring the strategic aspect of uranium as a resource. So, this is where I would like to warn you that sometimes news articles will have an ideological bias. But for UPSC aspirants, it's very important to build a balanced understanding. So, don't worry, we will have a very balanced discussion on this topic. First, we'll understand why uranium is important, where uranium is found in our country, how much of resource do we have when it comes to uranium, and what is our dependency on uranium imports. So let's quickly understand this, the distribution of uranium, and then we'll talk about uranium as a critical resource, and then come to the point of tribal rights and environmental concerns and what is the way forward. Now if you look at the map here, you will see the regions in our country where uranium deposits reserves have been discovered. One of the most important uranium reserves of India is in Jharkhand, in the Singhbhum district, in East Singhbhum region. We have Jaduguda, where the Uranium Corporation of India Limited already has an operational mine. We have been mining uranium in Jharkhand at the Jaduguda uranium mines. Apart from this, one of the world's largest uranium deposits has been discovered in Andhra Pradesh, in the Kadapa basin at the Tumalapalli region. In Andhra Pradesh, considerable uranium deposits have been discovered, but mining has not begun. Then in Meghalaya, particularly along the Garo, Kasi, Jaintia fault line, we have the Mahadek Basin. And in the Kasi region in particular, uranium deposits were discovered many years ago. And the government has been making efforts to mine the uranium. Then, apart from where you have the Delhi super group of rocks, a geological formation where minor uranium deposits have been discovered. Now, apart from Jaduguda uranium mine, we have no other functional operational uranium mine in the country, which means we are dependent on uranium imports. The domestic uranium that we are mining, most of it goes towards our weapons program, given the strategic nature of uranium and nuclear weapons. Most of the domestic uranium we mine is channeled towards our weapons production. But when it comes to the civilian application of nuclear energy for power generation, for industrial and medical purposes, etc., most of the uranium that we use in our country is imported. Several countries are known to supply uranium to India. We have signed civil nuclear agreements as well. Though we are not a member of nuclear suppliers group, we have engaged in nuclear commerce. Countries like Russia have supplied uranium. We have agreements with Australia, Kazakhstan, Namibia, and others. Historically, Canada also used to supply uranium to India. So India has a lot of import dependency on this critical resource, and that is something you can't afford, especially when India has a very ambitious plan to scale up nuclear energy. Because see, don't forget the climate targets. We are committed to bring down emissions, fossil fuel based emissions. We are looking to reduce our dependency on thermal power, coal based power plants, move away from fossil fuels, and nuclear energy offers one of the cleanest alternatives. Despite the risk of a nuclear incident, the technology is pretty safe. There are enough fail safe systems. And if India can scale up nuclear energy projects, this could be the future for our energy requirements. It could help India meet its energy security requirements. So definitely uranium is a critical resource, not just from a economic perspective, but from a strategic perspective. Imagine if we can reduce dependency on coal, petrol, diesel, crude oil, and gas. We won't be tied to geopolitical events anymore. Right now, our energy supplies are heavily driven by geopolitical developments. A war in West Asia, or the Ukraine war and sanctions on Russia, or a blockage in Suez Canal or Hormuz Strait. They can disrupt energy supplies, threatening our economy and our security and strategic interests. But as we shift away from fossil fuels and let's say we rely more on nuclear energy, India can definitely become a little more self reliant. So there is a great economic advantage, strategic security based advantage, geopolitical advantage as well. So uranium is indeed a critical resource. So the government is absolutely right that it has to go ahead with uranium exploration and exploitation. Whatever limited resources we have to explore them, we have to exploit them. But this cannot be done at the cost of the environment, at the cost of tribal rights, and at the cost of uh, the overall human cost in general. Because, see, as I told you, when it comes to the Kasi people, particularly with regard to the Meghalaya mining project, the Kasi region enjoys constitutional protection. Under the sixth schedule of the Constitution, Autonomous District Council has been provided here with local autonomy provided for tribal affairs, for protecting tribal land, protecting tribal customs and culture and tribal rights. Such a large mining project will raise serious environmental concerns and health concerns and socio-economic concerns, which can impact the Kasi tribe. Because uranium mining is known to be quite deadly for the environment as well. There is a possibility of radioactive leakage. It could raise the risk of radioactive poisoning. It could result in contamination of the air, water, and soil. Because there have already been studies and reports around Jadugudda in the Singhbum region of Jharkhand, where the impact of uranium mining is seen on the local population with severe health impact. So, this is something the government cannot ignore. In the name of national security and strategic objectives, you can't ignore tribal concerns, the concern of the local population, the environmental challenges. Then what's the whole point of providing constitutional autonomy to the Kasi region if the government is bulldozing this by using a office memorandum of the Environment Ministry? This is essentially a bypass of the established process. Of course, this matter would reach the courts as well. And here I would like to remind you of one legendary case. In a very similar situation, a particular tribe fought a legendary legal battle at the Supreme Court almost a decade ago in 2013 in the Niyamgiri case. You've heard of the Niyamgiri Hills in Odisha. It is very rich in bauxite reserves. The center and state governments had awarded the mining license to a major firm, Vedanta Group. But Niyamgiri is the home of the Dongriya Kond tribe. The Dongriya Kond have resided here for centuries. This is their homeland. They worship the forest and the mountain as well. So the Dongriya Kond tribe fought a legendary legal battle at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had to intervene to stop the bauxite mining project. So something similar might happen here as well. And more importantly, Kasi tribe has constitutional protection under the sixth schedule, which was not entirely seen for Dongriya Kond. Though it was covered under fifth schedule, the Niyamgiri region was under the fifth schedule. Still, sixth schedule areas have a higher degree of constitutional autonomy. So most likely, if the matter comes up to court, it may not stand the scrutiny of the Supreme Court. But the very fact that the government is trying to find this route is quite concerning. Now, this is where we need to establish the right way forward. See, the way forward lies in sustainable development, which means sustainable exploitation of resources as well. Yes, critical resources are needed to power the nation's economy, to handle and take care of our security strategic interests. But it cannot come at the cost of human rights. It can't be at the cost of environmental concerns and human health. This is where the balance has to be struck. And that responsibility lies only with the government. The government can't run away from this responsibility. So you can't bypass public consultation just because local people are not agreeing. Obviously, it's their land, it's their livelihood, it's their health. Why will they agree for such a project when the government is not convincing them? The government has that responsibility, that duty to convince the local population to take them on board. This is a project of national importance, right? So, if it is a project of national importance, yes, the government will have to go ahead, but you can't bypass the regulations and the legislative and constitutional rights which are granted. You have to do it the right way. Hold public consultations, convince the people, ensure that they will be rehabilitated, compensate them, put in measures for protecting the environment and human health, ensure that the consequences of the project is limited. and build accountability and transparency in the process. That is when people will be convinced they will part with their land, they will part with their rights and resources if there is a guaranteed promise from the government that they will be rehabilitated, compensated, and the environmental, tribal, and health concerns would be addressed. So that should be the way forward. It might be time consuming, it might delay the project, but that is the only way forward. Focus on sustainable exploration, right? So please take up this practice question on this important topic. The topic is connected to not just economy, it's connected to social justice. It's also linked with science and technology as well, geography as well, right? So now let's move on to the next topic. We have another interesting article today, very, very interesting article, which is related to supercomputers. This article helps us understand a core concept in science and technology, a static topic. And there are some current affairs pointers for your prelims. So this article is relevant for both prelims and mains. So let's understand what exactly are supercomputers. How are they different from your regular computers that we all use? Now, if you look at your computers, your laptops, your desktops, right? They run usually on a single processor, or there might be parallel computing where you have a dual core processor or a quad core or octa core processor, right? But generally, when it comes to our traditional computers, the laptops, desktops that we all use, their computing ability is very limited, constrained by the processing capabilities. So our computers that we use, the normal ones, they are good for maybe basic tasks, running basic applications, carrying out your work, typing a document, editing a video, or even playing video games, right? For these basic tasks, the computers that we have, the processing capabilities they have is more than sufficient. But to carry out complex calculations, for example, the complex calculations involved in weather forecasting, or the complex mathematical calculations involved in simulating a nuclear reaction, or in simulating weapon testing, the complex calculations involved in, let's say, statistical exercises. This can't be handled by your regular computers. They don't have the processing capability to handle so many complex simultaneous operations in parallel. This is where supercomputers come in. Supercomputers are entirely different. It doesn't look anything like your regular computer. Supercomputers employ the advantage of parallel computing on a massive scale. Yes, even our computers have parallel computing. As I said, it's not just the unicore processors that we have anymore. Today we have dual core, quad core, octa core processors, which we use as well. But when it comes to supercomputers, you multiply this by several hundreds and thousands. That is the scale at which a supercomputer can operate. The performance of a supercomputer is measured with the parameter known as flops. I'll explain what is flops. We'll come to it. Essentially, it it has the ability to carry out millions and millions of simultaneous calculations or parallel computations. So this is the very fundamental nature of a supercomputer. It is built to handle millions and millions of parallel computations which are necessary. So there are multiple processes which are connected to a node, and these nodes can transfer data at very high speeds. Generally, our traditional computers just have a CPU and a GPU, right? CPU will handle all your general tasks. A GPU was mainly built for graphic processing for video games. But now GPUs are being repurposed and employed for very high intense processing when it is necessary, like for crypto mining, for example, or for running AI algorithms, for example. But in a supercomputer, you have GPUs at the next scale where millions of processors are essentially placed on these chips, connected through these nodal points, and they have access to their own memory and file storage system as well. So imagine a server farm or a data center, right? That's how a supercomputer would look like. It looks nothing like your regular computer. It's a massive computing facility. It's like a huge lab. Let's say, for example, you think of the CERN super collider. right? One massive facility used by multiple research teams to test the results. So, in a similar way, a supercomputer employs parallel computing at scale, and it has the ability to conduct millions and millions of complex calculations parallelly because the processes are arranged in such a way that they are able to parallelly distribute and handle the computations. Instead of going in a queue one by one, the competition tasks are divided into different jobs and tasks, and various processors which are built into it will take up these tasks and run them parallelly to provide you the right output within a short span of time. A traditional computer would take maybe years and centuries to complete a calculation, but supercomputers can do that in minutes or in days or in weeks. So, this is the reason why supercomputers can change the very game of research and development. When it comes to weather forecasting, weapons development, drug discovery, when it comes to simulation of, let's say, any industrial process, right? So they have enormous applications. But the problem is these supercomputers generate enormous heat because of the parallel processing which is happening, the multiple processes which are connected, at each node where high speed data transfer is happening, significant amount of heat is released. If you don't handle the heat and cool it down, the processes will melt, right? Essentially, the system will destroy itself. So to prevent the self destruction, cooling solutions are critical for a supercomputer. That's why supercomputers are connected with water pipes, cooling units, refrigeration units. They're even essentially placed under specialized liquids in almost like a water pool, like a swimming pool like structure to provide for the cooling solution to maintain the right ideal temperature. This cooling solution can be very, very expensive. The power requirement of supercomputers is also massive, and the power required for cooling solution is also massive. So to run a fast supercomputer today, you need as much electricity as it is needed to power an entire town or an entire neighborhood. That is the kind of electricity consumed by a supercomputer. Now, what kind of software do you find on a supercomputer? Is it like your regular Windows operating system or the other operating systems that you're used to, be it a Mac or be it the Android, or is it a Linux based operating system? How is it? How do you interact with the device? What is the kind of interface that you have? Again, supercomputers are nothing like your traditional computers. It's not as easy to use. Supercomputers are essentially linked to certain research stations, research facilities which have access to them. So the researchers who are accessing it, they use a unique parallel programming language. One very popular platform is the MPI, Message Passing Interface, or even OpenMP. So just make a note of this for your prelims. So such unique softwares which are developed, they are used to maintain the interaction between the user and the supercomputer. So only those who have access to these supercomputers can essentially log into the device, and they will basically give out a list of tasks to be performed. So this is entered as a script, as a job script, just like you give a prompt to a AI bot, right? In a similar manner, researchers, when they have a certain task to be performed by a supercomputer, certain simulations to be carried out, they create a job script using PMI or OpenMP language. This is fed into the supercomputer, which can understand the job tasks which are assigned, and accordingly, it will distribute the load. It will distribute the load amongst various processors. It has millions of processors which will basically distribute the workload. Because sometimes processors will be running constantly. Some processors at different nodes might be idle. So that's not the most efficient utilization of a supercomputer. But a supercomputer is so well designed that there is automated load balancing where the system decides for itself as to which processes are free, and it will queue up the tasks, ensuring that the assigned job is completed parallelly by running simultaneous parallel operations. So this is the measure of the speed of a supercomputer. Flops, which I mentioned earlier, floating point operations per second. How many floating point operations can be performed by the computer in a given second? This determines the speed of a supercomputer. So we measure this as tetraflops, petaflops. I'm sure all of you would have heard about. these measurements that a supercomputer is having this much speed of few teraflops, or this supercomputer in China has a petaflop capability, right? This is what we normally hear. This is what many countries have already built, supercomputers with the ability to handle teraflop, petaflop calculations, which involves millions and millions of calculations per second. But today the world is entering the exaflop stage. Across the world, researchers are building exaflop machines. You know what's an exaflop? They can perform quintillion operations every second. So this is the emerging domain when it comes to supercomputing. Now, as I told you, researchers who have access to supercomputers will use their devices, the login devices that they have, to access the terminals and feed a job script to it, assigning the tasks, the simulations to be carried out. And eventually, once the calculations are performed, the output is not only stored on the supercomputer, but it can be downloaded as well, so that the researchers can visualize the data, or they can look at the final output and understand and visualize as to what is the end result of that simulation. So supercomputers generate a user readable output eventually, which can be transferred to your regular computers as well. Now, the point is, does India have supercomputers? Where do we stand when it comes to our supercomputing capacity? See, India was looking for supercomputers as early as 1980s, right? But this technology was denied to India as technological sanctions were placed on India to prevent us from accessing advanced critical technology, because this could have powered our nuclear and space program. So United States and few other Western countries, they proactively blocked the access to supercomputing capabilities. India's access to processors, critical software, and hardware was blocked by these countries. We could not access the supercomputers that were available. So India went indigenous. We tried to become self reliant. It was in this backdrop of global technological sanctions on India that India established the CDAC, the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, which was founded in 1988. Today, this is the lead institution that powers India's supercomputer programs. Is that clear? The CDAC is based out of Pune and Bengaluru. It has two major facilities, one in Pune, one in Bengaluru. CDAC is now collaborating with other research institutions like your IITs, IIT Delhi, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, Indian Institute of Science Bengaluru, the IISERs and CSIR labs, DRDO labs. They're all collaborating together under the leadership of CDAC to develop India's supercomputing capabilities. Today, the most powerful supercomputer that India has is the Airavat. Please make a note of this for your prelims. The Airavat supercomputer is the fastest that we have today, and it is built at the CDAC facility in Pune. It is used for various purposes, from scientific research to weather simulation, forecasting, to even defense and military requirements as well. So we have the National Supercomputing Mission launched by the Modi government in 2015, which is pioneered by the Department of Science and Technology and Ministry of Electronics and IT. So it's funded by these two ministries, the Ministry of Science and Tech and the Ministry of Electronics and IT. And the institutions working with CDAC are Indian Institute of Science Bengaluru and the IITs and other central laboratories. So under the National Supercomputing Mission, the goal is to build 70 plus high performance supercomputers with a performance range in teraflops to petaflops. This has been the global standard, where you have supercomputers that can perform teraflop, petaflop operations. But now the world is moving towards exaflop operations. As of now, India doesn't have an exaflop machine. We have supercomputers in the teraflop to petaflop range, but the world is now moving towards exaflop machines. Now, apart from this, we have the Param series of supercomputers. In fact, the initial supercomputer that was developed by CDAC as early as 1990s and early 2000, they all come under the Param series. You might have heard of Param Padma and the entire series of supercomputers under Param series. So some of them are located at IITs and other central laboratories, and many more are being built under the Param series. Then for weather forecasting, India has taken a big step recently at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology in Pune. Pratyush is a dedicated supercomputer today, just meant for weather forecasting, which is heavily used by IMD, India Meteorological Department, to forecast monsoons and cloudbursts and heavy rainfall. Then we have Mihir, another weather forecasting supercomputer, which is in Noida at the National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. So we have two dedicated supercomputers for just for weather forecasting, one in Noida, one in Pune. Then India has now started developing indigenous processors as well, such as the Rudra server, which is going to become the building stack for the future supercomputers of India, along with the Ohm high performance computing nodes. So instead of importing these nodes and processors, we are building them indigenously. We are building the very foundation for the future supercomputers of India. But again, India has a lot to learn from other countries here. We have a lot of catching up to do because countries like US, China, Israel, and others, even Russia and other developed nations, they are many, many steps ahead than India. Japan, South Korea, these countries are many, many steps ahead of India when it comes to supercomputing capabilities. See, India's fastest supercomputer, Airavat, it is in the top 100 of the world. There is a global list compiled, which gives you the list of top 500 supercomputers in terms of their flops. And India's Airavat is in the top 100. Well, this is good news, but when you compare with others, leading powers like China, US, we are many, many, many steps behind. Recently in Europe, a big advancement has been seen. The Jupiter supercomputer was launched, which has become Europe's first exascale supercomputer. So countries are already rolling it out into application stage, and we are yet to develop a exaflop or exascale supercomputer. But the next big milestone would be to integrate quantum computing with supercomputing, because quantum computers are completely different from your traditional classical computers. They work on the principle of quantum mechanics, right? And if you understand the principle of quantum mechanics, you will know that a quantum computing machine can essentially perform these calculations at a much, much higher scale as compared to your traditional classical computers. So, the future integration of quantum computers with supercomputing with AI is what is going to bring the next big evolution in technology. So, this basic understanding is required for you for your prelims and mains exam. Now, let's look at another important article. UK, Australia, Canada have taken a very, very big step. They have recognized the Palestinian state yesterday. Portugal has also taken the same stand, and maybe today or tomorrow, France and few other countries are also expected to announce this at the UN General Assembly Summit, which is starting from today. Now, this is the biggest shift, one of the biggest shift in Western foreign policy. And I'll quickly explain why. See, the very creation of Israel, it goes all the way back to 1917, when the then global power, UK, Britain, colonial imperial power, promised the Zionist movement through the Balfour Declaration to help the Zionists, the ultra nationalist Jews, to help create a homeland for them. Now, see, this was not Britain's place to make that promise, though the Palestinian land was under British mandate uh, post Second World War, right? But prior to that, Britain had no authority or no legitimacy to make such a promise. Balfour Declaration essentially spurred the Zionist movement, which had taken root in 1800s itself. The point is, it was Britain, later backed by the US, which enabled the Zionists to establish Israel as a state. As the Jews started returning back to Palestine, which led to large scale communal clashes between the native Palestinian Arab Muslims and the incoming Jewish migrants. Eventually, the final solution, the only practical solution, was to create two states, which is what the UN provided for. After the UN was established, it dealt with the Israel Palestine question. And by 1946-47, the two state plan had been proposed. Countries like India eventually came around to accept that this is the only reasonable plan. Initially, India and many newly independent nations were opposed to the creation of Israel because Israel and its creation was an imperial project, a largely imperial imposition. And without consulting the locals, a outside population was being introduced. So India and many other countries rejected the creation of Israel initially, but later, as violence escalated and this was seen as the only practical solution, most countries came around to accept the two-state plan. That there should be two countries, one to protect the Jews, to have a state for the Jews called Israel, and a state for the Palestinian Arabs. But Israel unilaterally declared independence in 1948 with the backing of UK and US, and it essentially never allowed Palestine to be set up as a state. Then the cycle of wars and violence started, as you all know. So now, in a way, it has come a full circle, right? A century ago, it was UK which aggravated this process by backing the Zionists through the Balfour Declaration. Now the UK itself has gone back and now recognized the Palestinian state. Now, Western foreign policy in general was pro-Israel always, always from 1947 onwards. Be it US, be it France, be it Germany, be it UK, Italy, all these major powers, they've always been pro-Israel. For the first time, you are seeing this big shift happening. Even Canada, Australia have joined the UK to officially give recognition to Palestinian state. Other European countries have already done it. Countries like Spain, Norway, Belgium, all of them. Even Portugal, just yesterday, has brought up a similar announcement. Now, today, France and others are also expected to recognize Palestine. Now, this highlights the situation in Gaza with regard to the ongoing Gaza war, because this is a pressure tactic that Western governments are trying out to bring that pressure on Israel and US to ensure the war in Gaza comes to an end. As you know, more than 65,000 Palestinians have been killed, majority of them being children, right? So Israel is facing accusations of genocide, war crimes. So to bring this horrific, brutal war to an end, European countries are finally acting, and this move will bring some pressure on Israel. It may not end the war because Israel still has American backing. US, Israel still are going ahead with the conflict, but the European pressure will change the dynamics. And for us, what is important is that this is the first time you're seeing a big shift in Western foreign policy where they are recognizing Palestine and backing the two-state solution. India has historically always supported the two-state plan. India has already recognized the Palestinian state as well. In fact, we have our separate ties with the Palestinian Authority. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look and wrap up the session for today. The Delhi government has announced a proposal. It has come out with a solution to tackle the deadly smog which Delhi experiences during the winter months. As you all know, Delhi is severely affected by air pollution. During the winter months, especially December, Jan, the air quality drops to alarming, dangerous levels. So to tackle the problem, Delhi government has proposed an idea and it's going to launch this as a pilot project. The idea is to use fog eating technology. What is this smog eating technology that the Delhi government is talking about? Let's understand this quickly. So essentially, the Delhi government is planning to use a type of paint, a very unique paint, which has photocatalytic capabilities. This is a reference to titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide, it is known for its ability to scatter sunlight and react under UV radiation. Titanium dioxide can basically break down, decompose organic compounds. For example, you might have seen titanium dioxide in your sunscreens, correct? It is extensively used. So the proposal of the Delhi government is that this is based on scientific studies as well, that if you use titanium dioxide paint roads, footpaths, pavements, and public spaces with this paint, right? It will essentially help in breaking down some of the organic compounds that are released when fossil fuels are burnt. So this could be oxides of nitrogen, nitrogen dioxide, for example. It could be volatile organic compounds, which are released when hydrocarbons are burnt. This is what primarily contributes to air pollution, right? And the particulate matter eventually contributes to heavy smog formation. So when titanium dioxide coating is provided on roads, footpaths, and public spaces, it is proven that under the influence of sunlight, that's why it's a photocatalytic reaction. It's called photocatalytic coating. So in prelims, UPSC might ask you, What exactly is smog eating photocatalytic coating? So, under the action of UV radiation, the titanium dioxide which gets activated can react with the organic compounds and decompose them, break them down. This will help in tackling pollution. So, if buildings are painted with titanium dioxide, roads and public spaces are painted with it, it definitely has proven to help tackle these organic compounds and pollutants and break them down. But however, there is a serious concern, very, very serious concern. Are you aware titanium dioxide has been banned in sunscreens and cosmetics in many countries? You know why? Because titanium dioxide is considered to be a potential carcinogen, which can cause cancer. It's also used as a food additive in some countries. It was added as a food additive, which has been banned by many countries today because it's a neurotoxin, a immunotoxin, which can in turn trigger cancer as well. So it has deadly health effects and environmental impact also is quite considerable. So there are studies. For example, in 2017, I remember there was a study by a team of researchers in France and China. They countered this idea because by then, by 2017, this research was already there that titanium dioxide can be a solution to deal with air pollution and smog. But this new research by a team of researchers from China and France, they proved the deadly side effects of titanium dioxide. It can have a detrimental impact on human health. It can even enter the soil, water, and the groundwater table, contaminating them, leading to long lasting health consequences. So, when countries have banned it in food additives and in cosmetics, painting the whole city with it doesn't make sense. But Delhi government, being the Delhi government, is trying to go ahead with this idea of using smog eating photocatalytic coating. Next, another environment related topic today, the Bandwari landfill in Gurgaon, a notorious landfill where urban waste, solid waste from the urban areas is dumped. It has been a big environmental concern. And now the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, has ordered the authorities to take immediate action to tackle the leachate drainage which is happening from the landfill. The landfill is a place where urban waste is basically dumped by the civic authorities. Since they don't have the processing capabilities and recycling capabilities, most of the urban waste gets dumped in a landfill, right? It's compressed by using machines and eventually they build it up like a mountain. So it'll have all kinds of waste from plastic to electronic waste to even hazardous material. So this landfill is completely exposed. It's exposed to sunlight, it's exposed to water, rainfall, right? So it undergoes weathering. Eventually, it will start releasing enormous quantities of methane. Landfills are a major contributor for methane emissions, by the way, leading to a significant rise in global temperatures. It's a greenhouse gas, essentially. Correct? But apart from that, when landfills interact with water during rainfall, when water essentially mixes with all the waste material, over a period of time, the weathering and breakdown which happens will release a toxic like substance, which is referred to as a leachate. All the toxic materials will start leaching, right? It could be heavy metals, it could be ammonia, it could be arsenic. And these toxic substances, hazardous materials will start entering the soil, the water in the nearby region. It will percolate into the groundwater table. And thus, landfill leachate is a deadly environmental concern and a human health concern. So, at the Bandwari landfill in Gurgaon, one of the largest landfills in the country, the leachate concern has been always present. NGT has ordered the authorities to take immediate action to deal with the leachate problem. Is that clear? Next, the Kartarpur corridor is in the news in the context of the India Pakistan cricket match, right? The Sikh community has asked a very valid question to the government. If India Pakistan cricket match can take place, why aren't we opening the Kartarpur corridor? Right? Because after the terror attack, the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor, India Pakistan tensions have remained high. Almost all our cultural and economic engagement has been completely cut off and stopped with Pakistan. You might have seen how the Indian cricket team refused to shake hand with the Pakistani cricketers, resulting in a big controversy, the handshake controversy. So, if BCCI has been allowed to hold cricket matches and participate with Pakistan. Then the Sikh community is asking a question: why India is not working with Pakistan to reopen the Kartarpur corridor? So, what is this Kartarpur corridor? Why is it so important for the Sikh community? See, in Sikhism, there are few sacred shrines. Just like you have the Golden Temple in Amritsar, there is Dera Baba Nanak in Gurdaspur district of India on the Indian side of Punjab, very close to the Pakistani border, close to the Ratcliffe line. On the other side, around 6 kilometers from the border, we have Kartarpur. At both these places, there are two very, very important Gurudwaras where Guru Nanak Dev, the founder of Sikhism, is believed to have spent his final years. Both are very sacred sites, but the partition of India Pakistan had essentially divided these shrines, denying the Sikh community access to Kartarpur. So, from many years, many decades, the Sikh community in India and around the world were demanding India Pakistan to create a travel corridor, a visa free immigration corridor. But because of the tensions, the wars, the issue of terrorism, constant tensions and conflict, India Pakistan never managed to implement the Kartarpur corridor. So, if Sikh pilgrims, if they had to pay their respects at Kartarpur, either they had to reach just the border and look at the binoculars which were installed. From the binoculars, they had to view the Gurudwara located 5-6 kilometers away across the Ravi River, pay their respects, or they have to take a very risky route. That is, apply for a Pakistani visa, which usually would be denied. If at all they get a Pakistani visa, they had to travel to Pakistan through other countries, maybe through West Asia or Europe or Central Asian countries, then enter, let's say, Karachi or Islamabad, and then travel by road to Kartarpur, just for a site which is hardly 6 kilometers from the Indian border. So it made no sense. So Sikh community was denied of its sacred religious right. So finally, in 2018, India Pakistan took a very big step. Prime Minister Modi and then Prime Minister Imran Khan signed an agreement to build the Kartarpur corridor, and the construction was completed in 2019, right in time for the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev. So this is one of the biggest cultural initiatives between India and Pakistan. So through the Kartarpur corridor, a visa-free immigration corridor has been created where Indian pilgrims, right, Indian citizens can apply, get a single day travel document. Pakistan they will then issue a single day travel document. It's not a traditional visa. You apply with India's MEA. India will share the data with Pakistani authorities. They will issue a single day pass, allowing you to travel across and pay your respects at Kartarpur and come back on the same day. So it's a one-way visa-free immigration route which was created, roughly around 5 to 6 kilometers long, built over the Ravi River. It's a land border point, a land border crossing point. Clear? So the Sikh community is questioning, if India-Pakistan cricket match can be held, why can't you reopen Kartarpur? Right? Next, there is a very important location in the news, Bagram Air Base. Donald Trump has essentially ordered Afghanistan, the Taliban regime, to hand over Bagram Air Base to the US armed forces. And Taliban has obviously rejected this approach of Donald Trump. See, it was Donald Trump who negotiated with Taliban, struck the peace deal back in 2020, and eventually the US troops were pulled out. US exited Afghanistan, allowing the Taliban to capture power. But when the US invaded the country back in 2001 and fought the Afghan war until 2021, a 2 decade war, the US armed forces, particularly US Air Force and the CIA, had built one of the largest military bases, which was the Bagram Air Base. Where is it located? It's located to the north of Kabul. You can see in the map here, the north of Kabul, that's where Bagram Air Base is located. This was the primary staging area for the US Air Force, for CIA, and for US Special Forces to conduct their counter-terrorist operations when they targeted Al Qaeda, Taliban, and other terror entities in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. So when US exited Afghanistan in 2021, US had left all the military facilities, including Bagram Air Base. They even left behind some military equipment as well, which the Taliban have now started using. So now that China is getting close to Taliban and China is looking to step up its presence and influence, now the Americans are concerned maybe China will get hold of the Bagram Air Base and turn it into a Chinese military facility. So Donald Trump has recently brought up this issue and he has been ordering Taliban to hand over Bagram Air Base back to the US, and Taliban is rejecting it. So just know the location of this airbase. Next, a key development in the world of sports. I know we usually don't discuss sports topics, but what to do? UPSC surprises us. In the last few years, there have been sports related questions again and again. So this is indeed a big development. Minakshi Hooda has won the World Boxing Championship in the 48 kg category at Liverpool. So just note down the fact, nothing else. Don't waste your time. Just note down the basic fact. Minakshi Hooda, well-known Indian boxer, she competed in the 48 kg category at the World Boxing Championship held at Liverpool, and she has won the gold medal. Coming to the last topic on the supplement section, the Hindu has a very interesting topic here, which I think can be useful in your mains answers or in general for general awareness. The German tank problem. What is this German tank problem? See, during World War II, the Allied powers, UK, France, Britain, and even Russia, which was aligned with them, the Allied powers could not get a hold of how many battle tanks Nazi Germany was producing and deploying in the battlefield. Because you need to assess the strength of your enemy, right, when you're involved in a conflict situation. So UK in particular was very actively working to estimate the number of aircraft, the number of tanks, number of war equipment that Germany was building and deploying. But no matter how much they tried through intelligence methods, they could never get reliable estimates. The MI6, right, ran many covert intelligence operations to try and get an estimate of the number of battle tanks, but they could never solve the problem. They could never get reliable intelligence on this. But this problem was solved by mathematicians, by statisticians. How? What they did was they made use of the destroyed and captured German tanks, and they all had a serial number painted on it. They realized the serial number was in a sequence, like a proper sequence, one after the other, like your currency notes. So using this, they developed a simple formula, which is a very basic formula in statistics, to estimate how many of those might have been produced. Depending on how many tanks were captured or destroyed and the sequence numbers, they developed this statistical method to estimate the number of battle tanks. And this estimation was very, very accurate. Much more accurate than intelligence-based assessments. Now, this tells you how statistics can be very useful. Even when you don't have the full data, you can still provide accurate estimates by employing the method that was used to solve the German tank problem. Now, let's say in terms of population, demography, maybe there is some data available, but not all the data is available. You can uncover the hidden truths through statistics. That is the power of statistics. Yes, sometimes statistics can be unreliable, but with the right methodology, statistics can give us insights into things that we don't see. It could be in our ecosystem, maybe the species that we are not aware of, or demographic trends and patterns in our population. So this can be brought out with greater accuracy by employing statistics. And that is the lesson you learn from the German tank problem that was solved primarily by the British statisticians during World War II. So just make a note of this interesting anecdote. On this note, I bring my discussion to an end. So I hope the session has been useful and I hope you have understood everything. If you like the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and subscribe to our channel. That is it. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.